My name is Jennifer Mitchell. I am the Executive Director of the HOPE program. Donnell, thank you so much for leading the conversation. I'm a big fan of Black Power. And Deputy Mayor Thompson, it is always inspirational to hear your thoughts and your vision. So thank you. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for our next panel, Sideya Sherman. I've been Executive Director of the HOPE program for 9 years, and I remember first meeting Sideya when she was the Senior Zone Coordinator for NYCHA's REASE programs. And here we are 9 years later, and she is Executive Vice President of Community Engagement and Partnership at NYCHA, and also got the prestigious honor of being tapped to be the Executive Director of the New York City Taskforce on Racial Inclusion and Equity. And that's a big job right now. Basically, they're tasked with making sure that the impact of COVID that disproportionately was on low-income communities of color, that as part of the recovery, there's inclusion and there's equity. I know one of the big initiatives this task force is working on is making sure that 600,000 New Yorkers get access to broadband internet. And so big stuff going on. Sideya, we're thrilled to have you moderating this panel. And I've been seeing lots of the questions come in, and people are really asking for what are tactical skills and what are real career paths. And so I think you have an amazing group of panelists that can share some of the answers that people are really wanting to know. So without further ado, Sideya.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and I'm really happy to be here with everyone today, and also really, thankful to follow Deputy Mayor Thompson and always inspired by his remarks and his thinking, which is so creative. So, as Jennifer mentioned, I came to NYCHA almost 9 years ago, and I've had the privilege of working at NYCHA to connect residents to economic opportunities in a variety of capacities. So I've done all the jobs, from direct recruitment events with residents at our developments to working with employers, training providers, labor unions, as well as working across city agencies and systems. I can say with full confidence that this work is hard. It can be challenging to connect the dots between a variety of stakeholders, even when we're mutually aligned. But I also know that it's absolutely possible. And our team at NYCHA, along with our partners, and most importantly, residents, have been able to make some great things happen. But there's more to do, of course. So, at NYCHA, we serve over 500,000 New Yorkers through our conventional public housing and our Section 8 program. The majority are Black and Brown New Yorkers. Many are municipal employees and the essential workers who have kept our city running, particularly during COVID. And over 20% of our own workforce are NYCHA residents. NYCHA communities, like many communities of color, have been impacted by COVID. And having an economic recovery that is inclusive, that is equitable, is critical to the success of our city. While I oversee a division at NYCHA, I also have the honor of serving as Executive Director of the city's Taskforce for Racial Inclusion and Equity, which is co-chaired by the First Lady, Deputy Mayor Thompson, who you just heard from, and Deputy Mayor Pereira-Hense. The task force was formed in late April to address the disparities that were laid bare during COVID and ensure that the city recovers in a way that is fair and equitable. While many of the task force initiatives are serving New Yorkers and communities of color broadly, we've had a specific focus on the 27 hardest hit communities. Most of the city agency leaders on the task force either come from, work in, or currently live in one of these 27 neighborhoods. And for me, it's all three. So this work is also very personal. There have been a number of task force initiatives that have ranged from expanding access to healthcare through new COVID centers of excellence to the broadband expansion, which Jennifer just mentioned, some summer programming that occurred through the task force, new mentoring and consulting services for MWBEs, and this work is ongoing. Efforts like this are only successful through collaboration. At NYCHA, we've nurtured long-standing partnerships with many of the groups you've heard from today, like Green City Forests, the HOPE program. We're also heading into the 11th year of our NYCHA Resident Training Academy, which is a partnership with Brooklyn Workforce Innovation and City Tech. And the Academy has really served as a primary vehicle to prepare residents for jobs with NYCHA and with our contractors. So, I think to Jennifer's point about like what are the mechanics of these jobs and how do people actually get them, there can sometimes be skepticism, particularly based on past experience about green jobs and whether they really hold the promise that we all seek. And we heard some of that in our earlier panel, right? This idea of what is a green job. But we know that these jobs are real. We know they're necessary if we're going to address climate change and environmental health and environmental justice. And they can be a variety of jobs, right? And there's ways in which we can increase access to green jobs in the green economy by also breaking down some of the barriers and how we define them. At NYCHA, we have our Office of Resident Economic Empowerment and Sustainability, better known as REES, which really works through multiple levels to connect the dots. So the folks in REES work on the ground with our partners and residents and frontline staff and community stakeholders. They work directly with employers, labor, and other industry partners. And then most importantly, they work within NYCHA to make sure that we're maximizing all of the levers that we have to create opportunity through our direct hiring as well as through our spending. As part of NYCHA's sustainability agenda, the authority has pushed forward a variety of new initiatives, including energy performance contracts, solar gardens, weatherization programs. Resident engagement and employment has been a foundational component of this work. It's also fostered creativity. So for example, our EPC contracts have generated resident jobs ranging from field technicians to community outreach workers. We have contractors who have developed on-the-job training opportunities to really reduce barriers to employment that can sometimes be placed through credentials or years of experience. And we also have been able to build out academic bridge programs, which have helped residents prepare for testing into some of the unions, particularly Local 3. Our preservation and new development programs also all have resident hiring requirements, have MWBE contracting requirements, and also have sustainability standards that must be met. And as we consider new ideas for how we will preserve our entire portfolio and really be able to garner new investment, jobs and contracting opportunities will be centered in this work. So we spent time this morning learning more about the sector, about the market, and this is our opportunity to dig a little deeper with folks who are carrying out this work on a day-to-day basis. I'll just close by saying that, the fight for racial justice, for racial equity, is also a fight for an inclusive economy. We have an opportunity to reshape our local economy through this recovery. So it's crucial that we consider how do we best position New Yorkers for these opportunities, particularly our young New Yorkers. What are the ways that we can be intentional about making sure that people have ladders for advancement, for ownership, and how do we make sure these are good quality jobs? So without further ado, I'm going to bring in our panelists who can answer these very important questions. So I will introduce our panelists. So today we have with us is Ashley Douet, who is installation monitor at Energy Training Solutions. We have Domingo Morales, who is founder of Compost Power. And we have Allison Ziogas, who is the Labor Relations Manager at Orsted. So thank you all for being with me today. Good to see you all. So we're going to dive right in. So Domingo, I'd like to start with you. You are an expert in composting, you understand food chemistry, you're an educator, entrepreneur. It would be great for you to tell us a little bit more about Compost Power. How did you decide to start your Compost Power, and how can others follow in your footsteps and become green entrepreneurs?
Okay. Hello, everyone. So a little bit about the beginning of my journey. In 2015, I joined Green City Force. And the reason why I joined Green City Force is because I was working a lot of dead-end jobs, and I felt like there was no room for growth. I was being paid below minimum wage. So I had enough. I quit a restaurant job that I was working in 2014. And Green City Force was the first thing that I saw when I came home one day, and I looked at the elevator and there was a flyer there. And I realized that I met all of the requirements to enter this program. And it really seemed like they wanted to teach us. They wanted to invest in us. So that gave me like a welcome feeling. And I thought, I'm going to apply for this program. It's going to change my life. But I had no idea what was really going to happen. You know, I was in that program. I learned about solar panels, energy efficiency, water conservation, composting, urban farming. I just learned everything sustainable. They had this whole umbrella of sustainability, and they taught us. And like 2 weeks after learning about stuff, we were put in the position to actually start teaching it. So student becomes the teacher, and that was sort of the cycle of how I got started. 7 months into the program, I was offered a job, or I was notified that there was a job opening at one of my training sites. And I applied as a joke. I really didn't think I was going to get the job. I thought to myself, this is going to be a good practice interview. So I'm going to do it. So I applied for the job, and I basically went to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden and I told them everything I knew about composting. And I didn't have two main qualifications, college degree or a driver's license, because I'm from New York City. Most of us don't have driver's licenses. So I applied lacking the two main qualifications for that job. And I ended up getting the job because thanks to Green City Force and the training site in Red Hook, the Red Hook compost site, I qualified because I knew more about compost than any other applicant. So that was sort of the start for me. From 2015 up until recently, I was training thousands of people how to compost sustainably, how to do it hand-powered, how to do it without rats and smells and actually making your community worse. And I had a hand in training other Green City Force Corps members just like myself, which is why the job was so exciting for me. I'd be able to train people just like me, because when I entered the field, it really wasn't diverse. I would go to meetings and it would be a room full of white people. And I felt like I was playing catch up because I wasn't taught about this as a kid. So Compost Power for me, it was an idea that sparked. I wanted to start something where I'm actually going into underserved communities and actually teaching them how to build compost systems and run compost systems. But I actually want to give them the resources, the infrastructure, the signage, actually give them the resources they need to do this work. Because at my role with the Compost Project, I was teaching people, but I really wasn't responsible for building new sites. It was people coming to my site and just seeing how we did things and learning a little bit about compost. For me, I felt like it was an opportunity to turn compost into a tool to teach everybody about sustainability. And if communities have power over their own waste, that just gives them that mentality of, hey, this is a system we had no control over for the past 70, 100 years, and now we have control over it. So using compost as a tool to actually give the community power to make changes in those systems and have ownership in those systems so they can bring the community up. So that's just a little bit about Compost Power and where the idea came from.
That's amazing. And I really, this idea of communities having ownership and power really is important and definitely relates to some of the discussion earlier. So Ashley, I'm going to turn to you and also hear more about your experience in the sector. So can you talk a little bit about the, workplace culture within the green sector? And I think Domingo spoke to some of this earlier as well, too. Just what is explain what the workplace culture is like, and what are the efforts to be more inclusive? And, are there ways that, the sector can adapt to attract more young people? And I know that you not only work in the sector, but you also have a background of working in organizations that connect people to opportunity. So it'd be great to hear your input, Ashley.
Yeah, I appreciate that introduction and the question also. Where do I start? I think the workplace culture, and it was talked about in the earlier panels, I think the workplace culture is just a reconfiguration of what we already live in and what we already do in society, especially when we think about, just connecting people to jobs or just doing regular outreach or just doing general construction, as somebody was talking about in one of the other panels. I think because of that, there's a real flexibility that needs to be displayed for young people coming in. And I think that also needs to be, well, I think it's something that's already kind of implemented. We all need to be flexible in what we already know. And also in more deeply going into that, there needs to be a lot more communication. I think this conversation is already a big part of that. But I think a big part of the workplace culture, especially for the green economy, because it's so new, is just being able to talk about it freely. And I think empowering young people to share their experience and where they're coming from, and kind of transfer those skills into this new way of doing things that we're trying to do. I think that's very important, and that's something that needs to continue to be emphasized. My time with the Hope program, I think, really brought home this idea of, because they have this huge path of transferable skills. And I think what it did for me was help me to see myself in a construction field. You know, I'm an aspiring art therapist, and I don't think that I ever thought about being a project manager before getting this job with Energy Training Solutions. But the advantage that I think Black and Brown people have of coming from certain communities and being able to tap in to certain levels of communication and levels of understanding, I think it's important to really cultivate that and show the example of how important it is to be able to use that to your advantage. And I think seeing other people that look like you and that have similar experiences than you is a great way of doing that also. So I think this networking thing that we're even doing right now with having this larger conversation is a big part of the workplace culture.
Definitely the network and the representation within the sector, for sure. Thank you. So Allison, I'm going to turn to you, and you have a unique perspective from working within the industry, within management, as well as working with labor. So it would be great for you to speak to the role of labor. What role do the trades play in creating and maintaining pathways into a green economy, and how can we ensure that young people have access to these pathways? And it'd be great for you to tell more of your story and the work that you're doing presently.
Thank you so much. This is a great question, and one that I'm excited to share my experience on. So labor unions have the largest training infrastructure in the United States, second to the military. And there's no one that knows more about how to execute workforce training and job readiness than unions. And they've been doing it for the last 100 years. And I think we'd be hard pressed to find a better model than union apprenticeships. And it's not that I'm biased, because I am a product of union apprenticeship programs. But union apprenticeship programs are a debt-free training program where you're able to earn while you learn. And each year, 170,000 Americans enroll in apprenticeships to learn the trades. And in New York, these are high-paying, family-sustaining careers on the order of $100K a year. And that's plus healthcare and plus benefits like a pension. And this all comes with no prior experience, just a high school diploma. And in today's day and age, where young people are graduating college with no guaranteed work opportunity and crippling student debt, the proposition almost seems just too good to be true. And to be clear, as some of our other panelists said before me, green jobs are jobs in the trades. So the way that I got connected to an apprenticeship program was through non-traditional employment for women, which is a pre-apprenticeship training program here in New York City that prepares, trains, and places women in careers in skilled construction. And for me, that meant becoming an apprentice with Local 3 IBEW, which is the electricians union. And after I went through my apprenticeship training program, and became a journeywoman, and then a sub-foreman, then a foreman, and finally a general foreman, where I was controlling a crew of 50 to 60 electricians, and I got to build my city. And I've worked on all kinds of projects, from working on the tracks of our subway system to rehabilitation of NYCHA housing. I took 3 World Trade Center out of the ground, the Javits Center expansion, and one that I'm particularly proud of is PS62R here in Staten Island, which was the first net zero energy school in the Northeast. And I really can't tell you the immeasurable amount of pride that I have when I can, travel through the city and I see all these projects that I've contributed on. And, through being active within my local union and linking with the broader social justice movements and coalition building specifically around climate change, with coalition groups like Alliance for Greater New York and Climate Jobs, all of that work has led me to my position as the labor relations manager for Orsted Offshore Wind. And I could have never imagined that when I set foot in News Door so many years ago, that the journey would have led me here. And one of the many reasons that I was so excited for my new position to join the Orsted organization, aside from really aligning all of my passions and being my dream job, Orsted truly recognizes organized labor as an important partner in the construction of our projects. So we really appreciate the vital role that unions play in combating inequality in our communities and their unique ability to provide workforce training like the kinds that will prepare local workforce for jobs with the offshore industry. So we know that the offshore wind industry will become a truly important employer in the United States. So as we set out on our mission to create a world that not only runs on green energy, but also creating job opportunities in communities where we work, we have been intentional about involving construction unions early on. And my primary role is developing that relationship. So we believe that good labor practices give us a competitive advantage for recruitment and retention of the clean energy workers of the future. And we're really dedicated to social dialogue with workers and their unions. And together we're identifying joint company and workforce needs to meet the challenges that this new industry presents.
Thank you so much. And so I want to actually, and thank you for speaking about wind in particular too, because I think, it's helpful for folks to think about the breadth of the industry. And so I want to actually turn to a question that's coming in from our audience, and I'll throw it out, and just anyone jump in. So what foundational knowledge, technical and soft skills are most valuable in setting up other young adults in the green economy workforce to succeed? And I'm also thinking about Ashley's point, and lifting that up, the importance of like these transferable skills, particularly in an industry that's constantly evolving. So I'll throw that out to you all to just jump in.
I would start off by like the first transferable skill is communication. Like learning how to communicate to different groups of people. That was one of the first things for me is, we call it code switching, a way to sort of know how to communicate in different groups and communicate well to all different groups. Another skill would be problem solving, which most people coming from underserved neighborhoods already have. We just have to find a way to kind of focus it on issues that can benefit us and benefit the community. But I would just say like that problem solving, going into a job, learning that, getting that hands-on training, actually going and teaching people while you're learning things, that actually being able to educate people. But like these trainings like Green City Force, SCAN, HOPE, what they give is the experience. A lot of people don't have that experience. So these training programs give us the ability to actually get our hands dirty and do the work. And that gives us those skills just by actually putting us out there. So like time and attendance is one that a lot of people need to get used to. Communication, problem solving, critical thinking, how to work as a team, but also how to work when nobody's watching you. Because that's also something, if you're doing a great job, even when no one's watching you, one day the right person's gonna see that and they're gonna wanna add investment. So, giving a good image whenever someone sees you working is always great for the people that come behind you to keep those opportunities coming.
Great. Any other thoughts? I see a second to that.
I kind of feel like that's it. He said, Domingo said a lot of, or I think everything that needs to be said as far as the foundation. But if I had to add one thing, I would say the ability to speak up, which is the communication, but also speak out, feel like you have the ability to influence what's going on around you. I think sometimes in work environments, we don't instill that enough. And I also think, God, I forget. Maybe it'll come back to me. Thank you, Domingo.
No problem.
Yeah, and I appreciate that point about problem solving because, right, folks come already with the ability to be innovative and creative and solve problems. So that's a really important to acknowledge. So we have another question from our audience, and I'll throw this out for everyone. How can we increase awareness and provide shared language to young adults to find value in these types of jobs? Specifically, how can you make the job of a plumber sound significant enough in the context of a green career? And I would just add to that. I think, in my opening remarks, I mentioned just this idea of connecting people to an opportunity, but also really being intentional about like what's the pathway from that, right? So what are the ways in which we can attract folks to the sector and also, be able to explain how significant the work is and what the pathway is?
I can just reinforce kind of my opening remarks and the value of the apprenticeship model in offering a no debt solution to these skills. It's a 5.5-year program for most trades where you earn while you learn, and you come out with the tangible skills that are going to be in demand for green energy jobs. As Daphne pretty eloquently outlines, jobs as installing heat pumps or doing a geothermal solar is plumbing work, and installing solar panels, that's electrical work. And and for offshore wind, there'll be welders, riggers, iron workers, electricians, pile drivers, carpenters. It's just, these are trades jobs. When we talk about green jobs, there is such a huge overlap of trade jobs. And of course, there's also the professional component as well. Like Ashley mentioned, in project management, in researching and doing geotechnical surveys. So there is quite a bit of professional jobs that are tied to this. But when we talk about kind of these jobs in terms of doing the physical work, we're really talking about.
I think your mic went out, Allison.
That's it.
Great, thank you so much. Did anyone else want to add to that?
I think really quickly, I want to add that you have to show people, I think especially young people, the importance of this work to their life. Like, not only is this a career that you can develop on, and these are skills that you can take to another profession if you do ever choose to switch, but this is something that's going to change your environment, your neighborhood. It's going to make things better for the people around you. I think emphasizing those, like, especially for me, someone who has a more wellness mindset than a business mindset, I think it's important to emphasize the benefit that it's going to have on the whole world, kind of, right? To young people.
Yeah, and I just second Jennifer just shared that comment as well. The idea that universally having this understanding of climate change and environmental policy and how impactful it is so critical. So we're going to go to another audience question around workers and community ownership. So what strategies for worker and community ownership can we cultivate and support through the growth of green jobs and sustainable solutions for both the planet and people? So what are the types of worker opportunities and ownership opportunities that we can cultivate to grow jobs as well as create sustainable solutions for people?
No? Okay. I would say actually, so one of the main things to create jobs in these communities and allow people to start businesses or start these small businesses would be to put them in training programs that not only train them as a plumber or as an electrician, but teach them the whole system, like a whole system approach. The plans, the plumber, the management, the funding, they need to know it all in order for them to start these businesses. Otherwise, they're going to start businesses and they're going to go out and try and hire people to do this work for them. And then they're spending money on something that they could have learned in the beginning stages. So I would think trying to think of a whole system approach, because whenever thinking about construction sustainably, it's a whole system approach. When the architect thinks about things, there's a whole team there. The electrician is there. The plumbers are there. the insulators are there, the bricklayers, like everybody coming together. So I feel like if we want people to be able to run their own businesses, they need to learn it all. And that's like something that I got from like growing up in foster care and getting odd jobs throughout the city, working in NYCHA, going through different job programs my whole life. I learned all those different skills, and I'm one of few, but I feel like if we have more programs like that, like what I'm trying to start, where I'm going to try and teach the people I'm teaching everything. I want you to know everything, every corner. There's no dark spot. There's no gray area. Just invest, educate, and show the people that you're working with that there's no limit to what you would do to get them to raise, even above us, to be better than us in the future.
Amen. So I couldn't second that more. I think that everything you just said. So I'm going to we're almost at time, so I'm going to close it out, and I'd like to hear from each of you. And this is really our call to action for ourselves and for everyone who's participating today in the communities that we live in and serve. So what's one thing everyone joining this event can do right now to tilt the future towards social and economic inclusion for young adults and the green economy? So Ashley, I'll start with you.
Okay, I would say tap into whatever resources you have and start having conversations with the young people around you. See what inspires them, what they like to do. See what you have, what you can offer them, and try to bring it together. Tap into the other people that are doing some of the similar things or some similar things, and create a network. That's a good start.
Great. Allison?
Yep, so we heard it with the previous panel, and I'll reinforce it. Fill out your census. If you're young people out there listening that aren't registered to vote, register. And if you're a person that cares about climate action and that feel that these are important issues to you in your personal life, you should make that known when you go to the
Great. And Domingo?
I would say, like, reach out to your community programs, your community centers, your local Green City Forest, Hope, Scan. Reach out to these offices, because most of the time they have a list of resources for young people, a list of like breadcrumbs for us to chase to make it to our dream career. I stopped using the word job, because we really need careers. We don't need something that is temporary. Like in 2009, we got funding and those jobs slowly disappeared. It wasn't like a 10-year plan. We need a plan like for the future. So reach out to your local community members, your local community centers, and see what resources are there for you and build on that. Try to add to that. Instead of thinking, how can I learn from them? How can you teach them? Because it's going to take, all of us getting together, working with these organizations to make them better and better and better. Like what's happening with Green City Forest. Every year with a new round of core members, the program gets better and better and better and better until eventually, we have these farms all over the city and people eating fresh produce. So just reach out to your community members, see what information they have. If you have information they don't have, or you can communicate with a certain group of people that aren't interested in communicating with them, be that bridge. So I would just say, like, try and get the community together by learning what resources are out there and what resources we can actually give.
Great. Thank you all so much. I feel like I can talk to you for hours. It was really great to learn from all of you. And I hope that our audience feels the same. And I can tell from the comments that everyone got a lot out of this session. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sideya, Ashley, Domingo, and Allison. I could have listened to you all day. What sticks with me is this whole idea around transferable skills.